Well, we've resumed today. Today we're representing rights. We're declaring the rights of God and protecting God's good name. And we're here in the name of protecting the good name of God today. Who has been much maligned over the thousands of years, blamed for everything, catastrophes, earthquakes, floods, drought. And because of God, we can't picnic in the woods around Sedona right now. Because of the drought. But it never dawned on primitive man that, the sort of ancient makers of ancient gods, that these things went on before mankind existed. It's hard to blame God for a human catastrophe when humans weren't even here yet, and earthquakes were going on, and floods and fires were going on. So it straights out, the pre-Christian history was rooted in conceptions of God that are pretty much anthropomorphic, in which God takes the blame for everything, sort of a dualistic perception of God, which persists to this common day and still causes consternation. Time magazine a few weeks ago on its cover expressed the degree of that consternation which still exists. So I'm glad today we have representatives of various religions, various religious orders. We have theology students from the University of Michigan, and I better watch myself. Better watch myself. So anyway. For the next book we're doing, we're calibrating the energies of the greatest theologians of history and calibrating what the level of truth of all the religions, branches of religions, spiritual groups, teachers, historical scriptures, etc. And if I'm still living, it'll be published in a year or two. In fact, as a matter of fact, I guess today's lecture did stir up certain energies in the universe, but we escaped the lightning and we drove between it, and here we are. So, well, when you talk about the absolute truth of God, you can see that you jeopardize a great deal on this planet, whose survival is based on not on the truth of God, but on the falsification of the truth of God. That's their power base, their financial base. It gets them the publicity, gets those bucks from all you listeners out there in TV land. So, anyway. I forgot what the lecture was on today, now was it? It was on... what the heck was it on? Religion or something? I don't know what. Spirituality. Oh yes. Well, it was misprinted on the schedule, so we won't be saying what it was anyway, because it said, what did it say? Spiritual truth versus religious following. It's supposed to be religious fallacy. Well, it's all following, fallacy. It's all the same, or we'd all be enlightened, right? Also, something different we'll do today is we'll have the group, as a group, I'm finishing a book called I. And see, sometimes people think, from some of the questions we get in the mail, people think that Susan and I make these things up, and what we find is whatever we believe in. Well, the kinesiologic method of ascertaining truth, of differentiating truth from falsehood, arose over 20 years in which groups many times this size, all of us did kinesiology. We all divided up into ones and twos, and we would have 1,000 people do it at once, and we did that all over the world many, many times. But those who have not witnessed any of those things, I thought today we'll do something like we did over the years, and we'll do it with this group here. And these are statements that are going in the new book, and we're going to check them out and make sure they're true before we put them in there, okay? Because this is a sort of a rattle-your-bones statement of spiritual reality, and it's going to shake up people, and we want to make sure that we're not lying. God really is awful, and you ought to be scared of him, you know what I mean? That did come up this morning, didn't it? It came up this morning. Suddenly I felt a huge shot of, like an attack of immense fear coming up. Wow, it was a big one. And coming up from the collective unconscious. So we're going to check ourselves out today. We want to demonstrate how we verify these things. They come from this consciousness as a knowingness, and then to express it in the world takes languaging, expression in literary form, and then what we do is we verify the truth of the statement. What's obvious to me may not be expressed correctly, for one thing. And we have made mistakes in the book. There was 2 commas out, 1 semicolon. People are really picky. We get letters, and then they show you, you're missing a colon right there. And I thought, oh my God, we're missing a colon right there. So we thought we'd be more meticulous in our research. So we have some mind-boggling statements here. As I say, as a God's rights activist, I feel it's my duty to make these declarations on behalf of deity and try and clear up his image in the public eye. His reputation has suffered over the centuries. So we're going to try and clear that up. So although I'm a God's rights activist, it's jocular, but it was quite a storm we got hit by this morning, was it not? Okay, so now we're going to verify everything we say today. Let's show you how it works. And we can have the whole crowd. We're going to verify 21 statements about the reality of God, which are actually mind-boggling. And we're all going to verify them forever, on tape, for history. So I thought that would be something fun to do that we've never done before, is write the book together. And and we'll put up these propositions. And then these propositions may bring up questions, and so we're going to answer these questions directly instead of waiting to the end of the program. Because when you make declarations of truth, it always brings up that which is untrue, surfaces, triggers it up for examination and verification. And whether the God who really hates you is true or not. You know what I'm saying? That comes right up. Whether you should be scared of God or not, see? So that came up today. Let's see where it came up from. What I felt was tremendous fear, resist. It came up from the collective unconscious, resist. It came up as the totality of the error, the misunderstanding of God, resist. Yeah, right. So it actually had to do with front page of Time magazine, resist. Okay. The unconscious fear of the apocalypse is what we cleared this morning. Resist. Yeah. If you don't think that was a strong one, it came up like shoo. Incumbent in the human psyche for that 2,000 years. It had a lot of energy. Let's see what happened to the consciousness of mankind. The consciousness of mankind is, what the heck was it? It was 207. It's now over 208, 209, 210. It's now over 209, 209.5. 209.5. No, 209. 209. Oh, I thought I'd squeeze an extra half a point. That means somebody out there is not paying attention. I'd have a point. You better wake up and. As we see in the book, the reason I'm talking about this now is because I'm just finishing this book, in which we sort of trace the evolution of creation, the dawning of the light of God as consciousness, the evolution of that consciousness throughout all of time and throughout all of time on this planet. It's evolution through the various life forms, which takes us through all the theories of evolution and creation, which we've pretty much settled with this crowd before, that evolution and creation are one and the same thing. So we're going to verify all these things as we go along, right? You don't have to stand up for everyone. You're going to be worn out in no time. Evolution and creation are one and the same thing, resist. Thank you. What we reaffirm with each lecture is the absolute reality that all things are what they are by virtue of the divinity of their creation, which is continuous, and it is the presence of God that accounts for all existence at every instant. Resist. Right. Because the old conception was God was the great ruler of the dice who appears in Genesis, disappears, and isn't going to show up again until Judgment Day. In the meantime, you're on your own. Good luck. Because all you have to go by is some historical documents and scriptures which sort of rattle your teeth when you really look at them. You know, this is the first time in history there's really been any kind of valid spiritual research. Is that a fact? That's a fact. Yeah. There's never been a tool to really do spiritual research. There's been historical research in which you paw through the deserts looking for old scriptures and deciphering the undecipherable, which you find on the sides of tombs in various hidden places. Or you find relics, or you find bones, or you find validation that such and such a community did live thousands of years ago. That's archaeologic, that's history and research. Has nothing to do with spiritual reality. Theology is the study of the nature of religion as it evolved over the millennia, and of course is an extremely interesting subject in and of itself. And I could easily have become a theologian. I got straight A in theology at a Jesuit university. That should get you in the door, right? Would that mean in the door? Good for you. And anyway, at the time I was an atheist, but that didn't bother my understanding of theology. It had nothing to do with my study of theology. And I respect theology, and you can define that the limit of theology. So we don't want to stress theology beyond which it is equipped to go, because theology and science are somewhat similar in that they're both in the 400s. And once you get up to about 496 or 498, you can't go farther with it. You can't really go farther with science or theology, because that's as far as the intellect will take you. I read a very erudite paper. I don't suppose I should mention his name, although I have it in the bibliography of the book. Most erudite paper I've read yet on the relationship of consciousness and advanced theoretical physics, quantum theory. Now, this is a very impressive, that paper is about as high as you can go with science resist. Yeah. So he's up at 4, and that paper, we should not mention his name, correct? Correct. Okay. Anyway, that paper, he's a very well-known writer, a very advanced researcher in the nature of science and consciousness. And science is one way to approach consciousness. And I've spoken at their conferences a couple of times. It's a very erudite group. The only difficulty is science can only take you to the high 400s. And the spiritual realities really don't show up with any strong indication until you get into the 500s. So there's a block, and as I read this paper, it's extremely erudite. It's beyond my capacity to comprehend the mathematics of quantum mechanics. But the feeling I got was that the intellect is being pushed to the almost painful limit of where it can go, you know? And I've read a number of those things, and I hear them at science and consciousness kinds of conferences. And, you know, my psyche is also in the 400s, and it's very impressed when it says, and then I have the ultimate solution always. You put a line under all of this, and you put infinity under there, and there you go. You always come up with the same answer. That which is not comprehensible. So the difficulty with science and advanced theoretical physics is it takes us right to the door. And what we suspected and what we've said before is that quantum potentiality is the doorway. That infinite quantum potentiality is the infinite doorway of infinite potentiality. Yes, so they're correct. That is the doorway. Except with science, you can't go through the doorway. So what science does is take us up, and this is very erudite and very impressive. And it always makes you want to go back to school and study quantum mechanics and math. I like quantum mechanics, but I don't like the math that goes with it. But it does take you right up to the door. But it doesn't take you through the door. To get through the door, you've got to jump, even Einstein. Einstein's 499. You have to jump through to the 500s. And so the intellect takes you as far as it can go. I respect theology because it's, I find it very fascinating, and I could really spend a couple of years just going to a theological seminary. I just love doing that. So if I had another lifetime or two, I would just blow a hole on just going to theological seminary and writing up theological treatises. Become professor something or other. Schnappenhofer at some university. They always have wonderful names like that. Hans Schnappenhofer. I'm just Sir Dr. Doctor. I don't have any great title like Schnappenhofer. Yeah. All right. So I thought we would start with then discussing the reality of God and try and nail it down. I mean, nobody has ever nailed it down, much less publicly. There's exhortations. I watch some of these preachers. They're wonderful. They're dramatic. They have great dramatic ability, and they're very impassioned. And if I was a follower of theirs, I'd probably be a very enthusiastic follower. All right. So, how can we verify then what has been bandied about? See, if you look up theology in Encyclopedia Britannica, it runs quite a few pages. I mean, a lot of theologians, a lot has been said going back to ancient Greece. And it takes you into philosophy and metaphysics. And of course, the crux of it is epistemology. So those of you who are intellectuals know that the crux of theology then really ends up in the hard problems, the hard problem of epistemology. And epistemology can only take you to the door. Epistemology can only take you to the door. Epistemology can only take you, the truth of epistemology can only take you to 499. That's correct, is it? Yeah, it does. It only takes you to 499. Why is that? Because you're still in mind. And mind, intrinsically, in order to be mind, has to be dualistic. So the reason theology, epistemology, philosophy, advanced theoretical physics, quantum mechanics can't take you through the door is because they're all dualistic systems of knowingness. They're all dualistic. There's a this and a that. There's a me and there's a the self and that which is known, which is different than the self. So all of these will take us right to the door, but they won't take us through the door. Some other quality is required. I think a study of theology gives you great respect for the human intellect. I mean, the way God transcendent versus God immanent is discussed in all the various world's religions is quite impressive, and I find it quite fascinating. But what you're really understanding through this study is how the human mind works. What you end up with as a straight-A student in theology, epistemology, advanced theoretical physics, and quantum mechanics is an extremely advanced and sophisticated understanding of how the human mind works. That's where it takes you, right? To the door. However, that drive that takes a person through the door, I think if correctly recontextualized, has the power to take you through the door. Anybody who spends their whole life getting right up to the door, anybody home? Is there God? Is there reality? Anybody who spends their whole life straining to get there has certainly got enough momentum and motivation to break through the door. And it only requires unblocking that door. So today I thought we're going to make some statements about God and see if they're verifiable. And I thought we might even do kinesiology today. We'll do ones and twos, and we'll present some of these to the entire audience. It isn't just the two of us at home sneakily trying to prove that God exists or something, you know what I mean? Well, she believes it, I believe it, so the kinesiology, because people question kinesiology. And so we'll make a few comments about that today too. You see, kinesiology itself calibrates at 600. Kinesiology is at the doorway between the ego and the non-ego, between the duality and non-duality. So it stands like a guardian at the door. Kinesiology itself, as a science, calibrates its reliability. The truth of kinesiology itself calibrates exactly at 600 resist. Wow, 600 is exactly where you shift from ego into enlightenment. So it's a critical level. Therefore, kinesiology is difficult. People try to grasp it intellectually. I said, don't try to grasp it intellectually. When you stab yourself, it bleeds. That's good enough, isn't it? When you stand in the sun, you get warm. When you stand in the rain, you get wet. That's all you got to know about it. If you ask, the most futile question to ask about anything is why. Because the ultimate reality, there is no why. There is no why. Therefore, all these are based on a fallacy. The first fallacy is that of duality, which is built into languaging and logic and conceptualization itself. What was the second one? I forget what the second one is. Therefore, to arrive at truth is totally subjective. So what logic and all these things are looking for is, by a means of duality, to try and discover the nature of that which is non-dualistic. It can't be done. There's a chapter I'm writing calling The Final Blocks to the Doorway, because at the doorway at 600, when you walk through, you can't take duality with you. You cannot take any baggage with you. All that you've ever known, think, believe in, can mentalize about, conceptualize about, you cannot take with you. It has to be left at the door, because at that point, mind disappears. You can't take the content of mind with you. When mind disappears, it dissolves with the mind. So all of that you have accumulated is, at that point, useless. It's useful to get to the door, but then at that door, one has to drop it. So we're going to make some interesting statements, and we're going to do kinesiology. I thought we're going to divide up into ones and twos. There's a fun thing to do. We haven't done that since kindergarten. Let's all divide into ones and twos. 1, 2, just go down the row. You're one, you're one. Everybody should know whether they're a one or a two, you know what I mean, in this world. We haven't done group kinesiology with this group. It'd be fun to do. If you know if you're what. The beginning of wisdom is to know whether you are one or not. Okay. We will charge the first experiment we will do we're going to do a quick rough one so that when we go down these questions, most of you are all familiar with kinesiology, and she and I will do it, and then I'm not going to teach it anymore. Any more questions on kinesiology will be stuffed back in your mouth, and you will be turned around in that direction and never to be returned through the door. All right, so I'm going to be the doctor. So number ones are going to be the doctor. We're not going to spend too long at this, but I want us to know enough to validate all of this in public. Okay, I'm number one, so I'm the doctor. You're number two, you're the patient. I have permission to do this with you, resist. I make a statement. I have permission to do this with you. All right, I use one little finger, see? Now, when she pushes back, she only pushes down with enough to resist me. If I put down three ounces, she only needs 3.5 ounces to withstand me. She doesn't need 5 pounds. You see, the biggest problem we see with kinesiology is nothing makes them go negative because they're resisting gravity. They think they're still in a tree, and if they let go, they're going to fall out of the tree. This is what's going on unconsciously in the back of your head. We were watching it last night on TV on the Animal Channel, and here's this primate up and you can see he's starting to slip, and you can see all his anti-gravity muscles flex. So that's what happens when people, we say, picture bin Laden, they start to go weak, and then suddenly their anti-gravity comes back up. They think they're an ape in a tree. So you're not an ape in a tree. If you let your arm go, you will not fall out of the tree. All right, I'm going to push down with about 3 ounces. That was 3 ounces resist. That was 2 ounces resist. That's 1 ounce resist. We can do it with a very small. See, she's small and weak. I'm small and weak. That's why I only push it down with 2 ounces. All right, 2 or 3 ounces, see? So you only have to resist enough to keep it from, you know what I mean? You only have to keep the paper enough to keep it from folding down. That's all. You don't need 5 pounds to turn the edge of this paper, you understand? We see people doing it like, you're not in the ring. So, all right, so I make a statement. I try to keep extraneous things like beautiful music and stuff like that out of the space. Okay, we have permission to do this exercise with this audience. Resist. Thank you. All right, so just one finger, a couple ounces. She resists. Now, if you've done this a lot of times, you can tell almost the instant. As I ask her the question, if the answer is no, you can almost feel a run of energy. You know the answer is, before your arm even goes weak, you already got that it's very sensitive. When done correctly by people who are integrous, this is 100% reliable resist. All right. When the statement is made as a positive statement by people who themselves are integrous. The other thing to make it work is you both got to be over 200. Bin Laden can't use it. That should fix them. That'll teach him. Take that, old Ben. So anyway, the purpose of the question has to be integrous. Okay. Our purpose this morning is integrous. Our purpose is to demonstrate an integrous method of discerning truth from falsehood for the good of mankind. Okay. So all right. So it's okay for us to do it. It's okay for us to ask these kinds of questions. It's okay for us to do it in front of this audience. You can't just presume it's okay to do it with this audience. So we get permission. All right, now I just make a simple statement, and I'm going to make one right out of the thing here, see? And then we'll all do the same one. We'll start out. First, the ones will be the doctors, and twos will be the patients. And then after everybody's got that, we're going to turn it around. Now, for an audience that hasn't done it before together, we haven't never done it all together as an audience. Let's see what we were going to ask. There's something else you got to ask about it. Well, I don't remember what it is. It was critical, but that's all.
You ask permission to ask a question, and then...
Yes, okay, so we'll ask permission. So first we'll have one's, oh, I know. I want to see if she's a suitable subject with me. Not everybody's suitable with each other. We found that, 10% of people have some alteration of their chi energy, and they're not really good at kinesiology. There's other methods of doing it. Or you get your friends to ask, should I buy that new Cadillac or not? You know? Anyway, not everybody's suitable. And Lou sent me, where's Lou? There's Lou. Lou sent me, bringing it up to date, that first of all, if only 18% of the population is suitable to do this, where does that leave us, right, to begin with? So we'd have to say that at the time, this was 78% at the time, that to begin with, only about 22% of the population is allowed to do it. Of that 22%, not everybody's matchable. A lot of times husbands and wives, for reasons we haven't had time to research, something about their chi energy, can't always do it with each other, they can do it with somebody else. So that we know about 10% of the population, it isn't going to work for reasons of peculiarities of their energy system. And we know that it's not going to, so what percentage of the population is able to do this? What did you say on that?
22%.
Huh?
Who cannot do it at all?
We ended up with the percentage that could do it. 20%. All right, so that could, yes. All right, so it is limited, which I didn't know when I first wrote Power versus Force, to really only 1 out of 5 people in the population. I didn't really know that. I knew that it didn't work if the question was non-integrous, but I didn't realize how limited it was. So it's really, its greatest advantage then is for integrous use by integrous people for integrous purposes. All right, so we want to say, let's say you're out in the audience, I'm 1, you're 2. Hi, 2.
Hi.
We're suitable to work together, resist. Okay, I want you to picture Mr. Bin Laden. Now resist. Thank you. I want you to picture Jesus Christ, resist. Okay. I want you to picture something or someone you love, resist. I want you to picture, well, we won't even picture him. He's too bad to picture. We don't want to picture him. Okay. All right, so we just want to get that you're suitable, your purpose, you see, purpose is set by intention. So the intention is integrous. The intention of your being here is integrous. The intention of listening to the lecture. So let's do 1s and 2s. Everybody get up. Number 1's the doctor. Number 2 is the patient. Just meet each other. Just test out the suitability. It's okay for us. Okay? We're going to do the whole bunch at once. This is fun. I haven't done a big crowd in a long time. After you qualify with each other, you can switch 1s and 2s. So doctors and patients, you can switch with each other now and verify again. Let's see, what percentage of them are getting it? Over 50% are getting it. 60%, 70%, 80%, 90%, 92%. Wow, 90% are getting it already. Ooh,
yeah, they
very
came
good.
here to hear you.
Yeah. Okay, now you can switch. Doctors and patients, switch if you want. Doctors and patients can switch if they like. 1s become 2s and 2s become 1s. What a party. All the 1s become 2s and the 2s become 1s.
David, tell them to be quiet and restate that.
Oh, they'll get it. All right. Okay, doke. Okay, we'll just have quiet for a second. What?
What if you need a new partner?
If you got somebody you're working with that is not working with, switch partners. Anybody who's not working, put it up your hands, and we'll just switch with each other. Sometimes it's the chemistry. We haven't had time to research it, but very often couples, husbands and wives, for some reason, is the worst. And people that are having trouble finding a partner, put up your hand. We'll play musical chairs. Okay, musical chairs. This goes. Okay, everybody switched. You got to play doctor. You got to play patient. All right. People who go strong with evil see me afterwards. All right, so that's good. I want to do it as a public statement, verifiable by a spiritual audience. Okay, over 90% habit, 92%, 94%, 93% habit, 94%. 93% is as high as we're going to get. Okay, there's one other trick. Ooh. I better not do it with this microphone on, but I'd like everybody to do the thymus thump. You smile, think of somebody you love, and go ha 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 ha. All right. It's over 93%, 94%, 95%, 96%, 97%, 98%, 98%. There's still 2%. Uh-oh.
That's okay.
All right, we got it up to 98%. 2%, I don't know, you screwed up somehow. Listening to the wrong music on the way here or something. The thymus thump usually clears it up. That was, Dr. John Diamond wrote that, and I've extolled its virtue. I can't do it with the microphone on because I'll blow your ears out here, but you go ha 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 ha. And stimulating the thymus gland at the same time. All right. So now this is a suitable audience. We get that it's 98% accurate right now. And the other 2%, you see me after. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Now, all right, here's what we're going to do now. You affirm that love makes you go strong, truth makes you go strong, that which is unloving, that which is fallacious makes you go weak. And we have 98% concordance here, which in this audience randomly picked. However, united by spiritual intention, that's very, very good. All right. Well, this sounds very erudite. I should have read this before. My God, this is great stuff. I didn't know theological students were going to be here. We'll sit down for a second, and then I'll read you this preamble. This is the way it's going to come out in the book, so when you get, if you ever get a copy, which I'm happy to send anybody to for merely participating, we're going to have these statements in there. It's going to be an important chapter. Despite the disagreements over the centuries about sacred scriptures of various religions, collectively there is a verifiable, authentic source of man's knowledge of the nature of divinity, which is actually quite impressive in their unanimity and concordance. There emerges then a substratum of irreducible truth, verified in all cultures throughout all times by those that we call mystics, sages. We now have a recently discovered calibration technique verifying truth from falsehood so as to be able to reaffirm spiritual reality and end up with sort of a modern day theology, which we will call this new religion spirituality. Spirituality is that religious discipline in which that which is provably the truth has been extracted historically, subjectively, and experimentally. See, because the source of my own knowledge is all three. The states that appeared of their own accord, then later on studying and finding a way of objective verification, and that we see the subjective theoretical subjectivity of people who've experienced the presence of God has been exactly the same throughout all cultures, throughout all histories, throughout all millennia. It's always been the same. Therefore, anything that varies from that requires explanation instead of the other way around. Well, traditional religion put it the other way around. Oh no, Scripture is what is the authority, and the mystic had better be beaten and burned until they change their mind and come around to the truth as the church saw it. All right. There is therefore available by a sophisticated intellect, subjectively, objectively, historically, a core of absolute validity that transcends all positionalities and all positionalities are maneuverings for advantage or gain. The only reason you can believe the mystic is because there's no advantage or gain to it. All things are suspect if there is gain or advantage. Inasmuch as one has all there is to have, knows all there is to know, and is all what is possible to be, there's hardly any gain the world can dangle in front of you. Like what already? Oh, golly. So we're going to start out and we're going to verify these statements, which will now become the famous Sedona Declaration in the defense of the good name of God. I'll read the first one and we're going to ask whether this is the truth or not. So you'll have to all be quiet and then I'll say, we'll test it, okay? Everybody get, doctors and patients get, no, ones and twos, get ready. We're going to hit it hard. All right, we're going to make irreducible statements about the essential nature of God as my own understanding and experience, as well as theologically verifiable. These are going to be statements in which we're going to settle it for mankind forever, okay? So that's why you're here this morning. All right, first statement. God is both manifest as the totality and allness of creation, and unmanifest as the Godhead, the infinite potentiality and source, quote, in parentheses, voidness, prior to form. That is a fact, resist. That is absolute truth. The level of that truth is over 900, 980, 999, 1,000. That is absolute truth to the degree that it's knowable in mankind. So everybody, we'll all do it at once. You can say, we have permission to ask, we have permission to ask that of your partner. We have permission to ask this now in this setting. The statement just heard is 100% true, resist. The statement is true at the level of truth that we calibrate at 1,000, resist, okay. All right, it's verifiable at the maximum degree of truth that is possible for a human to verify. That's statement number one. Does anybody argue with that? God help you. Anyway. Oh dear. Yeah. Okay, statement number two. God is infinite, beyond time, space, locality, and without beginning or end. Resist. That's true, resist. The level of truth is 1,000, resist. Thank you. Without beginning or end. You see what I mean? God is, these are commonly stated in theology, but we will prove it for ourselves. God is omnipresent. God is omnipresent. God is the same as allness, omnipotent, and omniscience. Resist. Those statements are verifiable and true. They don't depend on anybody's opinion. God is the source and substrate of consciousness, awareness, knowingness, and sentience. Resist. Okay. Everybody test that's true. That statement is true. Okay. If anybody gets no, don't hesitate, because we'll check it out. All right, no's go off to the side and we'll check you out later. Oh, golly. All right, now this is very interesting, having to do with science. God is the sole source of life. Resist. God is the sole source of the energy of life. Resist. All right. See, creation comes from the top down, but evolution goes from the bottom up. So life can appear as a worm. All worms leave now. Okay, so now let's test this. Sometimes what we do, we test all the, you see, you have to have internal consistency. If this is true, then we will test its opposite. Life arose accidentally as a spontaneous interaction of chemistry. Resist. All right. So there goes science. Goodbye. Goodbye, science. As the source of life. We're going to just confirm this. Evolution. We have permission to ask this. Evolution occurs within consciousness, which then manifests as form. Resist. Yeah. You see, the reason there's a missing link, because there isn't any missing link in form. You see, because creation is continuous. Each billiard ball is continuously created to be what it is. What we see is the branching of a branch, but the evolution of consciousness, the evolution of the species occurs on the invisible level of the domain of consciousness. That's where the shift in the evolution of form, because you see, the form includes aesthetics. When you just think how the eye works, you see, it just didn't accidentally learn how to blink on itself. I mean, who the heck would have thought of that? You know what I mean? Consciousness saw that construction, and by holding it in mind, it manifests as an eye. Resist. All right, so the eye didn't just grow up accidentally, you see? All right, that's enough science for today. God is the source of evolution and creation, which are identical and ever continuous and ongoing into this moment. Resist. Yeah. Creation is, what does creation look like? Creation looks like a room full of people testing each other with kinesiology, don't you see? The unfolding of everybody is becoming the potentiality of their own, in fulfilling the potentiality of their own essence. That's all that's happening. All right, so God is the source and essence of peace, love, stillness, and beauty. Resist. Okay? We're going to have fun when we get through this serious list. God is beyond all universes, all materiality, all galaxies, and yet the source of all that is. Resist. Okay. See, when you see God as source rather than cause, you have a whole different ball game of theology. Take that back to Michigan. The reason theology gets stuck in its epistemology, and the reason advanced theoretical physics gets stuck, is because this is still seeing things in terms of causality. Causality is a dualistic deception. There's a this causing of that. There is no this causing of that. The essence of that which is the source of all existence opens itself like this. It's really merely revealing the truth of that which it is. Nothing is causing anything. Huh? As the rose unfolds, nothing is causing it to unfold. The form is dependent on prevailing conditions, sunlight, water, etc. But it is not the sunlight and all that's causing the flower to unfold. The essence of the flower is intrinsic to its creation, and it's merely revealing to you that which it is, because that's how creation manifests itself in that which we perceive as the present reality. That truth is 1,000 resist. Okay, what was just spoken is the absolute truth. Okay. All right. God is the sole source of existence, and the potentiality of beingness is true. Resist. Just say to your partner, that's true, and resist, and you can swap partners if one of you has a doubt. If there's any imbeciles here that have to... Okay, now we're getting more sophisticated. God is the ultimate context of which the universe and all that exists is the content. Resist. Out of the unmanifest arises the manifest, expressing itself as the entire universe, and of course all the universes are without end, because everything that is created by the Creator contains the same essence as the Creator. Consequently, each universe that is created out of the fact that that is innate to its own essence is creating an infinite series of infinite universes which are creating infinite universes which are creating infinite universes, because that is their essence. That's the true resistance. Whoa, boggled myself there a second. All right. So it's critically different in theology to understand the difference between cause and source. You see, the error in the classic theologian, who's the basic classic theologian in Catholicism? Thomas Aquinas. You see, where Aristotle also did the same thing. When you go back through an endless series of causes, this cause, you're looking for the primary cause, there's the error. To think that the primary in a series is the same as the sequence of the series. No. The source of the series is not the same as the series. It's of a different class. In fact, it's a category logic error to resume that there's one great big billiard ball that created all the rest of the billiard balls in the universe. What makes the first billiard ball move is a non-billiard ball. Wow. Right? So trying to find God, call God as the primary cause of all causes, then is a logic error made by Aristotle and made by most theologians since. The beginning of a series is something that is not of that series. You got that reality? For this to exist, something that it is not is the beginning of the series. So in looking for the primary cause, you don't look for a cause. You look instead for the source. Huh? The source requires no explanation because it is not in a series of causes. Oh, I'm knocking myself out here this morning. What is this? It's because I have to read my own writing and it's on yellow paper and all the things.
You know how his writing is.
Okay, we'll get more erudite again.
Right.
God is the a priori, formless source of existence within all form. Resist. Within the illusion of form is non-form, which is the essence of form. Without non-form, no form could exist. That's true. Resist. Okay.
Can you repeat that?
No? God is not within the preview of the provable or the intellect. Resist. That which is provable by the intellect or reason could, by definition, not be God. Resist. The God that you can prove by the intellect then cannot possibly be God, because that which is beyond the intellect is not provable by the intellect. So all you could prove by the intellect is the concept of God. That you can prove with the intellect. For God to be God, it would have to meet certain requirements. So you can prove the intellectual position about God, but that has nothing to do with the existence of God. Okay. God is the source and essence of the subjective state of I-ness called enlightenment. Resist. So what the spiritual student is looking for then is God immanent, God as the self with a capital S, God as the essence out of which one's own existence is continuously arising. It didn't arise 75 years ago. It's arising right this moment. My birth is happening continuously. My existence is continuously sustained, just like a water fountain holds up a rubber ball, see? It's being held up continuously. It isn't the water that came out of this faucet 8 minutes ago that's holding up the ball. It's the presence of God now that is holding up the ball on top of the fountain. The minute you shut off the fountain, the ball drops. Oh, Lord, amen. Oh, scared myself there. That's how we call it the eye of the eye, because you're really talking the third eye. You're really talking about the third eye of the Buddhic body, the third eye of the Atmic body, the realization of the eye as, anyway. God is the radical subjectivity of self-realization with a capital S. Resist. All right, so this is the way of that we're going to talk about the way through the heart. You know, maybe the lecture after next, if I can get through that lecture. Now we're preparing the way. God is the radical subjectivity. So the realization of the self is a radically subjective state. That's why it's difficult to see. We're so used to space being around us, we don't notice space. When you walk in a room, you notice all these objects. And if I ask you how much space was there, what space? There isn't any space there. Nobody noticed the space because we take for granted the presence of the self without really realizing its true nature. God is descriptively both immanent and transcendent. And those two terms are merely artifacts of vocabulary. There's not two different gods, immanent and transcendent. Well, you think that sounds trivial. This is a sophisticated audience, and this would seem obvious to you. But there's a lot of world-great religions that'll burn you at the stake for saying that God is immanent and not just transcendent. In fact, in some of the world's religions, it would be a heresy now to say it. Okay. Right. Arbitrary points of reference. They have no intrinsic reality. There is no God immanent and a God transcendent. So we can't say God is both, because to say both is already the same logical error. Okay. The human experience of the presence of God is the same in all ages, all cultures, all localities. Resist. Experience of the presence of God is absolutely the same in everyone. You go back in the ancient Aryan sages, their description is the same. You see, the reason we want to nail this down is because anything that varies from this is going to have to explain themselves. We will put them through the Inquisition, and we have our own little rack. Whoa, God is in it and transcended. Okay, thank you. All right. The effect on human consciousness of the experience of the presence of God is subjectively transformative and identical throughout human history, and is verifiable in the present time by a calibration technique of level of consciousness resist. All right. That's what brought up the negative energy this morning, man. We really got hit by it. Truth, then, to claim itself as truth, has to withstand the test of truth. Right? If you tell me it floats, I'm going to put it in water. If it sinks to the bottom, I want my money back. Now, listen to this one carefully. Okay. This is going to be a long one. Get ready, okay? This is a long one. The essence of God does not include human frailties such as partiality, controllingness, duality, judgmentalism, vindictive, retaliation, wrath, righteous anger, resentment, vanity, limitation, arbitrariness, revenge, jealousy, vulnerability, or locality. That is a 100% correct statement. Well, that puts us at variance with a couple thousand years of spiritual, religious tradition, don't it? Let's do them once by one. The essence of God does not include the human frailties, such as partiality, resist. Partiality is a frailty of the human ego, resist. For God to have partiality, he couldn't be God. He'd have to be sort of dumb. All right. The essence of God does not include judgmentalism, resist. Wrath, righteous anger, vanity, limitation, partiality, location, and ethnic favoritism, resist. God has no favorite geography, resist. No holy lands.
You're going to let everyone sit down. They're going to get tired of this.
All right, we're almost done. The variabilities of the depictions of divinity reflect the variabilities of human perception and the human ego. Resist. When the obstacles of human mentation, emotionality, and the ego structure from which they arise are transcended, the self, with a capital S, is God immanent. The divinity within shines forth as the essence of one's own sense of I, as the self, capital resist. The self shines forth just as the sun shines forth when the clouds are removed, resist. Okay. God is the context and source of the karmic unity of all of creation. Resist. All right, so that's enough of an exercise for this morning. That should earn us breakfast and a space in the... Whew. Therefore, the way to God is merely through the affirmation of truth and not to be distracted by these side avenues. Because what came up this morning came up out of the collective unconscious. That was the collective unconscious of the totality of the fear of God in mankind, resist. It was like a ferocious fire going through the nervous system, and I just intuited, wow, that's what we brought up this morning. Because this lecture, what we're challenging is, you can see what we're challenging, correct? And the tenacious hold it has within the history of mankind, the reality of the truth of the nature of God has remained the same throughout all ages, in all cultures. It's always been described the same. Therefore, any variations from it would have to require some explanation and understanding. And with kinesiology, we've tracked down the sources of error, historically in many different cultures and various times. And the thing about doing spiritual research is you come up with astonishing discoveries that nobody's discovered before. Why? Because it's never been done before. This is the first time a telescope has been pointed at the heavens, and we discovered there's galaxies out there and all kinds of astonishing things. I'm holding in mind a question. Resist. Permissible, resist. Uh-oh. I'm holding in mind a statement, resist. It's permissible to demonstrate it in front of this audience, resist. Oh, well, we'll find out that one later. Anyway, sometimes we find out astonishing things and it says, no, not yet. I don't know why. I guess other information has to be provided first. So the lecture has been sort of sequential preparation of an understanding, a way of approaching spiritual reality, a way of approaching spiritual work, a way of transcending the ego by understanding its nature and not by attacking it. And people are always asking in letters, how can I advance myself spiritually? And the basic essence of it is always the same. And that is one's devotion to the truth. One's devotion to the truth transcends all obstacles. Let's see if that's a fact. That's a fact. One's devotion to the truth then overcomes all obstacles. And sometimes people will write a letter also that they don't understand certain things, and because there's such a huge volume of letters, they can't all be answered. And so what we generally say then is a letter that almost over 90% of the questions that are being presented resolve themselves with a little further reflection of the information that's been provided. It takes a certain amount of time to grow, you know what I'm saying? And a lot of times people will come up with a question that, it took me 20 years of meditation to even get to the edge of that answer, and he wants it tomorrow, I say, well, now. So there's a certain maturity, a certain, in other words, the growth factor, the growth factor, and each person evolves at their own rate of development, and that rate of development is absolutely correct for that person. And that's why we got to know resist. That's why we got to know resist. Thank you. Okay. Some individuals in the group could handle it. 40% could handle it. 50%, 60%. Okay. All right. So, therefore, some preparation of spiritually advanced work has to be done to become an intense spiritual aspirant. There's a certain level at which the desire to reach the ultimate state is like a driving force that takes over everything. At that point, you leave, much to the consternation of the world, everything. And they think you've lost your mind. And hopefully you have. And it takes them years to recover. They don't even, some never recover, but anyway. It's not comprehensible to the ordinary person what could have happened to you that made such a difference. Even such a thing as an out-of-body experience is not comprehensible to a lot of people. Near-death experience, those flashes of stillness when you suddenly feel the presence, are not comprehensible to the intellect. The state that came on at age 36 or 37, I forget what it was, there was no one to speak to about it for 30 years. I mean, who are you going to talk to about it? Nobody. So these states, which are really inwardly private, become validated by reading about them, knowing about them, hearing other people speak of them. I think each one of us, when we share our own spiritual experience, strengthens that of others. That we share a collective strength, and that sharingness of strength and experience reaffirms. Why is that? Why does it work that way? Because we live in a world in which all such experience is negated. It's negated, the validity of it is in question, intrinsic to the nature of language itself, intrinsic to the language of nature of science and logic. Right now, the God of our culture is science. In ancient days, man looked to religion for answers, looked to God for answers, looked to God for salvation. After many centuries of studying the sort of gods of negativity and not getting too far with it, and going through the Inquisition and various other tough times, mankind now looks to science, looks to the future. Because logic says most of religion you see is based on the history of certain individuals' experiences thousands of years ago, or perhaps reinforced by, in the last decades, as reaffirmations. But it very often ends up as a great emphasis on the irrelevant. Like the Buddha said, make no images of me. And the Buddha is, of course, the most frequently created image on the planet. There's more Buddhas sold than any other image or statue of anything. Oh, golly. So there's a great deal of emphasis on history, location, things that are really tribal, ethnic, cultural peculiarities then become included in these religions and now become part of sacred scripture and religious practice to the point that it eclipses the truth out of which it ostensibly originally arose. Whether you wear a turban or you don't wear a turban, what the hell does that got to do with the presence of God and the absolute reality of the infinite reality? I don't know. But in today's world, I just wouldn't wear a turban and trying to get on Trans World Airlines. I mean, it's just not it's just not smart. You know what I mean? I pray for his rights. He's got his rights, and yeah, if they want to put it down to the thing, I'll go out there and cheer for him. But it isn't really using your head. Well, the idea is that God will be offended if you don't wear a turban. Is that the idea of it? What is it? God hates people without a haircut, or what is it? In other words, that which is totally irrelevant to the reality of God and the presence of God as the truth within yourself is the point of emphasis. The whole point of emphasis now is whether you wear a turban or you don't wear a turban. How ridiculous can you get? You know what I'm talking about? Whether you eat meat on Fridays, whether you eat fish on Fridays. I grew up dreading to eat meat by mistake on a Friday. What if I ate a hamburger and then suddenly realized, God, it's Friday? High Episcopal, which is like Catholic, Anyway, in those days, all such things, you forgot a day of obligation. Holy mackerel, and I've already related to you the dreadfulness of confession on Saturday afternoon. And I would go for confession, for those of you who haven't heard it, as late as possible on Saturday afternoon, because you weren't supposed to sin between confession and having communion, Holy Communion. So the trick was you arranged to go for confession, Father, I've sinned, etc. And as late as possible on Saturday, and you go to the earliest Mass you can get to on Saturday, and quick have communion. And now if you sin, it's not going to be so bad. I mean, you made it. And I told you the dreadful morning on the way to church, and it was probably 1930 something or other, and here was this giant billboard with a Jansen swimming suit ad, and here's this voluptuous blonde in this swimming suit, and a sinful thought began knocking at age 12, you know what I'm talking about? Testosterone raging through your bloodstream. And there's this 32-foot long lady, and I'm on my way to communion. Life was a nightmare, I'll tell you. Christianity in the 30s was scary, It's no wonder I became an atheist. I mean, any sensible, intelligent person would become an atheist, and that's what I did. Just the constant fear of guilt. It isn't, it isn't just guilt, it's the fear of guilt, And many people, as they get more spiritually evolved, they're not really afraid of consequences or afraid of things out there. They're afraid of their own inner reaction to it. If I know this, I'm going to be hung with guilt. You know what I'm saying? Shall I steal the pen from the bank or not? Well, if I do, I'm going to be stuck with guilt. Every time I look at the pen, I'm going to feel a pang of guilt. It's not worth the guilt. Huh? Then you become inwardly, you become your own guru within, because now you're really on the... When you don't steal a pen because you're afraid of your own sense of guilt that would arise as a result, you're on your way. I mean, you are responsible for yourself morally, ethically, and spiritually. And you've reached integrity, because integrity is always blaming it on something out there. Once you cross over integrity, calibrated level of 200, now you own the responsibility. And you begin to see the source of guilt is going to arise out of yourself, not because there's a spot on your soul and God's going to punish you. So between late Saturday afternoon and Sunday morning, there was the fear that this sin would appear, and it was explained by the preacher that it would appear as a spot on your soul. So I walked around dreading this invisible soul where all these spots would be appearing. And God's spotting all these black spots on your soul as you walk by, And of course, that would lead to a fear of Judgment Day and the fearful God of traditional religion, which everyone fears, until they realize the true nature of God. So we should take a break, give God a rest, and I think we might do some questions on it, because some people who are doing kinesiology had some questions. We'll do some questions if there's any doubt about the validity of what we did, the degree of truth that we reach. What we did this morning has really never been done in the history of mankind. No group has ever collectively, simultaneously, verified in the most erudite way we know, to verify truth, the reality of God and the spiritual reality which we're all seeking. It's never been done before. And I thank you all for the effort. So we'll take a break. Okay? There was an old joke we used to tell in college, The student jumps up at the back of the question period. He says, "Teacher, did you say the universe is coming to an end in 50 billion years?" He said, "Yes." The professor says, "Yes." He says, "Thank God, I thought you said 50 million. We have that question in a new form. Some people say that a large planet X, is on a trajectory into the solar system. Let's see if that's a fact. That's a fact that people say that, resist. There is a planet X on its way into our solar system, resist. It will cause major Earth changes, resist. It won't cause. Planet X is on a trajectory into our solar system. That's a fact, resist. It will cause major Earth changes, resist. No, we have to ask it differently. If it continues its present trajectory, it would hypothetically cause major Earth changes, resist. No, it won't. Okay, as I say, even if this is so, at its present rate, projected into the future, we're talking millions of years, resist. So as I say, we can relax and finish making payments on your car. There's plenty of time. Yeah. Well, there's a lot of fun questions. If any more questions you want up, we'll do them verbally too. One interesting question was, how do you get through the door of the 500s? And that is actually a chapter that I have been writing on. It has to do with how do you transcend the experience of reality without deciphering, without channeling it through the intellect? Well, the 500s, where's our calibrated levels of consciousness? We need that just for reference. Where is the 500s? Here it is. Uh-oh. What does it say there? Oh, that's the doorway to the 500s. Reason will only take you so far. And then lovingness, devotion, reverence leads to an inner revelation. And traditionally, the methods of doing that, the way of doing it, has been prayer, devotion, meditation, the appreciation of beauty. This morning I was playing an incredibly beautiful CD. Whatever happened to that CD? Oh. Is it playable? No? We don't know yet. Yeah, anyway, if anybody can play it, it'd be fine. At the end of it is music that is so incredibly beautiful that if I didn't turn it off, I wouldn't have gotten here this morning. Literally. It was so, it takes you into, oh, that must be around 700. Let's see. That must be around 700. Okay. So incredible beauty is another way. It's a tape that Nico and Betty gave us. Namah Shivaya. And, but then at the end of it, it goes off into some incredibly beautiful music after the chanting stops. And the music is so incredible that you transcend. So, transcend the intellect. When the hair goes up in the back of your head and you begin to weep with beauty, you're over 500. Because the intellect doesn't go that far. You have to leave the 400s. When I traveled in Europe, I traveled from one cathedral to the other. And I go from Westminster Abbey to Chartres to Notre Dame. So the trip through Europe is from one cathedral to the other. People said, why do you plan your trip to Europe based on the cathedrals? Because that to me is the epitome of their civilization. The great cathedrals all calibrate around 700. When you walk into Chartres, and if the choir is practicing at the same time, it's difficult to keep walking because you almost swoon with the beauty of it. You turn around, you look at the blue window in the rear of Chartres. The Chartres blue is a very famous blue. It's never been reduplicated, and it's so exquisitely beautiful that you almost go weak with it. So that's one way to transcend 500 in the 400s is the pursuit of beauty. The chanting of that, let's calibrate. I didn't calibrate that. Permission to calibrate that. Namah Shivaya is over 500, 550, 560, 570, 580, 590, 600, over 650, over 680. Did you do that?
Oh, no.
She's doing that. Stop that. Let's do it again. Om Namah Shivaya. Om over 700. Om over 740. Om over 760. Om over 780, Om over 790. This Om is over 800 of the presence of God within. Om over 800, Om over 850, Om. Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah. There's another way over 500. Om. Let's all do an Om. I want to get the calibration of this Om. Is over 600, 650, 700, 720, 740, 760. This Om is over 750, 760. That Om is over is 750. So that's the experience of what 750 is like. You're walking through the woods by yourself, and suddenly time comes to a stop. The incredible beauty of everything shines forth. You look at everything is absolute incredible beauty. That happens in the high 500s too, and it makes it very hard to function because you're always breaking out in tears. And high 500s is difficult to function in the world. The cryingness of the saint, people who live in monasteries, is traditional. At a certain stage, it's hard to stop. You can cry for a couple of years. I cried for several years. It was impossible. I'd be in an airport, and when a couple would sit there, and they'd look at each other with a glance of love, and it would just that, if they weren't loving, it was okay, I could make it. She looks at him with that look, and wow, I'm gone. Incredible beauty does the same thing, right? I mean, you've all been at a symphony or a concert or something by Puccini. When Mimi's dying in Puccini, you know, La Boheme, all of a sudden there's a silence, and then suddenly the orchestra comes in with a chime like that, and you realize Mimi sings out, and God, it just goes right up. What is that note of Puccini? Is that over 500? 560, 580, 580. It blows you right out. So I still cry at La Boheme, and I've seen La Boheme many times. But when he realizes, Marcello, or his name is, realizes that Mimi has just died, then you hear like the soaring of the soul as it soars. And so we'll stop talking about that because the voice won't continue. So the incredible beauty shines forth, and we have a lecture after this one on devotion. How we're going to get through that, I have no idea, because this kind of thing happens all the time. But the presence of beauty, devotion to that beauty, what then becomes revealed is the divinity, the exquisite perfection of the presence of God manifesting. And now you're allowed to see that beauty. Huh? Beauty is different than pretty. The revelation is that the essence of beauty itself, the perfection, the radiance, the energy of beauty is your awareness. It's your awareness of the presence of God within all that exists. As that becomes permanent, you see it everywhere. You walk down an alleyway in the city of New York, which the world would see in a very derogatory manner. And it looks like a painting by a French impressionist. Here's the garbage can, and here's the dead rat, and, and here's the tangled mesh of so-and-so, and it's just incredibly beautiful. It's like a canvas, a perfect canvas. in which the intrinsic beauty of everything shines forth because there is no superimposition of intellectualism, goodness, badness, ideas of beauty and ugliness. So beauty, because beauty is inherent in everything. And in the book I'm finishing, I talk about Kleenex Zen, and seeing the beauty of when you're going to the bathroom and you see a piece of Kleenex sitting there and it suddenly strikes you, it's incredible beauty. You know you're getting there. First time I ever knew it was in an airplane, and you're sitting there doing your business, and you look at here's this Kleenex, and it's like this incredible. I've described it before, like a Georgia O'Keeffe painting. You see the sheer essence of beauty in all that exists. So the other doorway past the intellect is the aesthetics, the appreciation, the reverence for beauty, the reverence for purity and beautiness, and to see the sacredness of all that exists. Because all that exists is coming out of its source, then divinity is intrinsic in all that exists. The capacity to experience this divinity directly then becomes relatively innate to one's experience of life itself. So, how to transcend the intellect? You can't get there via advanced theoretical physics. You can't get there. You can certainly demonstrate its reality because using a calibration technique, which we talk about, you can calibrate what is the level of that beauty, and we just did it. We just did it. Its quality is ineffable. We use the term beauty, we use the term, but that isn't the quality. What makes the hair stand up on the back of your head when the violin hits a certain note is a different quality of consciousness, and it transcends the intellect. So the traditional ways to God, the upside, the positive side of religion, has been its recognition of beauty as a great transporter of the human spirit. That's what I mean. The great cathedrals of the world, the great cathedrals of Europe especially, depict probably the greatest possible achievement of mankind within the physical domain. The endless lifetimes, some of those cathedrals took 1,000 years to build. Century after century, people devoting their entire life to just carving one pulpit in 3D, and I've looked at pulpits that the man spent his entire life. There's 3 levels of figures within this pulpit. One entire lifetime just to do that one carving. So we won't talk anymore about beauty and all that. So that is one of the great and traditional ways to experience what you might say are various aspects of the presence, that which is love, that which is peace, that which is beauty. Not beauty of perception, not beauty of artistic appreciation, but an awareness that one is experiencing the essence out of which that beauty is being perceived. So devotion and its so traditional religion has understood that. So on the one side, there's the depiction of God as sort of a frightening monster. On the other hand, there's all that really sustains the core and keeps it going, because if there weren't any truth there, it would collapse out of its own negativity. as you walk into a great cathedral, one time I was in Cusco, and I wasn't used to the altitude. And as I got off the plane, I've got sort of a stoned feeling, you know what I mean? Like everything was incredibly beautiful. And I walked down the street and I could smell this incense. Wow, it's incredible. And so I followed the incense. The stoned feeling was due to the spiritual condition that I arrived in Cusco Inn, and anyway, the odor of the incense is coming down the street. And so I automatically followed this incense where it was coming from, and it was coming from an ancient church. And the church had all these altars, and these altars were all made of heavy silver, and you could see the prior influence on it. Anyway, it was right before Christmas, and as you got into the church, the incense got heavier and heavier. And the organ was playing flute music, and Peruvian flute music type of religious music, but played on, so it was coming with the sound of Indian flutes. So here's this incredible flute music and the incense wafting through the air, and it's coming out of a great big kiln up near the front of the altar is this big black thing, and this incense is pouring out. There's stained glass windows, and the sunshine is coming through the stained glass windows, so the blues and the oranges and all are intersecting the clouds of incense. In the meantime, in the back of the room are these old, I can only call them descriptively crones, old, bent over with long black, and the black thing over them, and they're rocking back and forth to the music and clicking these coins. So as the flutes are going like this, they're clicking the coins to the sound of the flute music, and the incense is surrounding everybody, and the colored light is coming through. And because it was near Christmas, in the front of the altar there was a creche, and in the creche were the divine figures. And these were lighting up and unlighting up periodically with the sound of the music and the incense, and you wondered, whoa, that's how you get beyond 500. Enchantment, one becomes enchanted, okay. The same states arise through meditation. The same states arise through mantra. The idea is to pull back from identification with thinkingness and words and the intellect, and begin to sense. So one senses that underneath the intellect and thought is some field of awareness. Otherwise, how would you know what you're thinking or what is going on in the mind? So this thinkingness comes to a stop, and one realizes that the stunning impact of this beauty represents the totality of the experience. I'm only breaking it down into words now. But at that time, it was the incense, the beauty, the music, the chanting, the rocking of the people to the music, the creche with the lights flickering, and the sheer divinity and reverence of the whole situation. So reverence, the reverence for that which is sacred, reverence for that which is sacred is one of the doors that opens the way to the 500s. One now does things not out of duty, not out of fear of consequences, not out of fear of punishment by a negative, arbitrary God. One does it out of one's love for truth, out of one's devotion to lovingness as a quality and a way of life. Lovingness, as we've said, is what makes you stop and turn the beetle over on his legs in the alley. He lays there on his back. He cannot get on his own little feet. He's got a big black... And something in you then, compassion. So compassion takes us beyond the 500s. The compassion for all that lives. The compassion comes up in one of the questions today. to try to complete the understanding of vegetarianism as a spiritual quality. That's this week's Time magazine. The cover of Time seems to anticipate what we're going to lecture here all the time. And somebody's leaking info to them. Anyway, vegetarianism we had brought up before, that there are many ways of contextualizing it. It can be merely a way of sacrificing. It can be what's called tapas, spiritual discipline. Not eating fish on Friday, you see, was a way. It can be looked at various ways, as a silly superstition or as an out-of-date. It can be looked at many ways. It can also be seen as reverence and respect for one's religious teachers. Whether it's true or not then becomes irrelevant. It's irrelevant whether eating fish on Friday is a sin or a not sin or something. Because the calibrated level of consciousness, the karmic consequences have to do with intention. So we'd say not eating meat on a Friday is out of fear of thinking of it as sin, because in those days we all thought of it as a sin, you'd have to confess it, is different than reverence. If you do that out of reverence, then it's a totally different motivation. So reverence then for truth, and the pursuit of truth, and reverence for those who are equally committed to seeking the truth. So another way to go into the 500s is reverence. Reverence, the appreciation of that which is sacred. So even if you don't hold it as sacred, I hold sacred that that person holds it as sacred. So what is sacred to them, I respect because I realize it is sacred to them, even though I may not be in agreement. That allows us to appreciate difference and still respect people who think differently than we do. So the vegetarian may do so for multiple reasons, and it would be the motivation. Out of respect for life, it is certainly part of almost every spiritual seeker's pathway. At one time or another, the question comes up. A lot of these questions come up. Can you have sex? Can you have a job? You know, I mean, the old thing was renunciation, right? To renounce the world, renounce all these things. The way of non-duality is more that one stays in the world and merely advances in one's understanding of them, moves from perception, moves out of judgmentalism, moves out of duality and perceives them as they are. As you perceive them as they are, their beauty shines forth. So one can do it out of respect. One can do it out of reverence. One can do it out of love for the animal. Reverence for its life. The Native American solved that one very well. The great white spirit of the Native American calibrates well over 700 and is quite a very advanced understanding of divinity. So the recognition of the sacredness of all life, which leads to the prayer of thanking the animal and for surrendering its life. So if you, at the level where you think that when an animal leaves its body it dies, there would be the obstruction of thinking that you're killing it. Huh? You think I can't eat it because it means killing it. I think in the last lecture we went through that killingness, didn't we? We'll just do it for those who are not there. We have permission to ask this in this audience. Resist. The animal doesn't really realize that it just died. Resist. It just goes right on in its etheric body and doesn't even pay attention. Resist. And comes back in another physical body and hardly notices that either. Resist. It just thinks it's one dream or another dream. Resist. Okay. All right, so when you realize that nothing dies, that nothing dies, nothing can experience death because death is not a possibility, then it doesn't make any difference. There is a certain level also of awareness, I never calibrated what it is, we can do it this morning, in which you see each animal willingly surrenders its life, its physicality to God via you. Let me see. That is correct. Yes, because I saw that there is a point at which the animal ensures its own evolution into the oneness with divinity. It sacrifices its physicality. For thee, O Lord, do I sacrifice my life. As an act of worship, I surrender my life to thee. That is so. I understand the animal soul. In my animal soul, because that which I am is all that is. In my animal soul, out of my love for God, over and over and over again, I willingly surrender this physicality. That's my act of worship. So as an animal, you would be depriving me then of one of my forms of act of worship. That's how I express my love for God. In the presence of God, one would, if asked to surrender one's physicality, anybody who was beyond 500 would become joyous at the opportunity. If it pleases thee, O Lord God, this physicality, I now surrender to thee. You understand? The sacredness of the animal soul is not a human soul, but all that's created by God is equally sacred. So the animal then can only come into physicality artificially in the numbers they do by the fact that man breeds them. If nobody ate, well, I think we said that before, if nobody ate steak, there wouldn't be any cattle out there. I mean, who's going to raise cattle if no one can eat them, you know what I mean? By their sort of being recycled through the energy fields of life, this is how they reach the completion of the potentiality of the realization of their own divinity. The animal experiences its own divinity. It experiences its own divinity without knowing its divinity. Yes, we covered that last time too. And that's what's called animal grace. You see, the intrinsic innocence, the incredible perfection and beauty of the animals that stands there. This happened to us, just a few weeks ago. And the 3 or 4 deer stood there, and we looked at the deer, and the love just sort of like poured out, by itself. Their incredible stillness. The deer are just so fragile. They're just so slim. And these little guys are like this, and they're looking, they know that there's something in that house there. We're looking out the window at them, and they were transfixed. The deer could not move. The deer could not move. They stood there like statues. Finally I realized that it was because of the energy we were pouring out. They were like blissed out and standing there. They weren't about to move. That's a fact, And this one deer in particular was very sensitive to it, and I had to stop loving her, appreciating her beauty, because she couldn't move. She was transfixed, She was transfixed by the energy of adoration, because the magnificence of the beauty of the divinity within her shining forth in her grace. We're having a bad morning. Well, you see what beauty does to you then, appreciation of beauty. It takes you right out of the intellect. I have to stop talking because the physiologic reaction of such beauty is that you start to cry, you choke up, you can't talk anymore. So that shuts you up. I don't know how we're going to get through that lecture, folks. I'm going to have to. All right, so we can adore and worship the beauty of the presence of the Creator within all living things, and within all form. And could I eat that deer? No, I couldn't, even in my present level of consciousness. That particular deer, I couldn't, no. All right, so that fluctuates then, depending on where you are in your spiritual evolution. Your understanding of reality is constantly transforming. So long as you think as there's life and death, the opposite dualities of life versus death, then it would be, you might say, spiritually incorrect to kill. Once one transcends that, and I've already spoken of that too, one time in a restaurant, I suddenly realized that I am meat. That's what you are, man, like forget it. So I ordered a steak and the heck with it ever since then. Do advanced teachers still have problems, bad habits, and neurosis? That's hysterical. Well, let's finish animals first. Can an animal ever take a human form? Can an animal ever take an animal can sometimes take a human form. We have permission to ask this resist. No, we don't have permission to ask this resist. Let's see. We didn't ask it correctly. This question is suitable to be asked at this present right now. No, it's not suitable. How do you know that? Can a human ever take an animal form? We have permission to ask that one. Resist. No, for some reason. Once in a while we get things that we don't know the answer. Why? We got to know. Well, we'll go back to teachers. Do spiritual teachers have problems, etc., bad habits, neurosis? The evolution of consciousness is continuous. It's continuous. Can everybody hear me all right? It's continuous. It's more complex, actually, more complex than can really be described, because there is, first of all, the karma of being human, intrinsic to being human itself, the karma intrinsic to the physicality of humanness, the limitations of having a human brain in which the old animal brain is still functional and quite active. The whole structure of the brain, down to the amygdala and the basic nuclei, are reacting emotionally to massive things prior to any intellectualization. You have the collective karma, you have the collective unconscious. The thing that we cleared this morning had to do with something coming out of the collective unconscious. You have the karma of mankind itself. You have your own individual karma. What appears to be a problem or a bad habit or a negative at one point, later on is not seen to be that way. It was only the way you were holding it. So in other words, it isn't a reality of a thing, but your perception and your belief systems and the positionality that you have about it. If you think you cannot experience God by eating meat, then that's going to be a reality for you. And as long as you keep eating meat, then you're not going to get that experience, because you're holding in your powerful mind that this is going to block you. If you think you can't experience God without going to communion every Sunday morning, then that's going to be a limitation. So each of these things, to say it's a problem, to say it's a limitation, depends on where you are along the pathway. What's okay in a Zen monastery in Japan is not going to be okay in some other local four-square church, let's say. So it depends on location, which definitions, and the definitions that come from automatically out of perception. So the first word in this question is problems. Everything's a problem. Name something that isn't a problem. Huh? Everything is a problem, is that right? Can you think of something that's not a problem? Air, there's not enough of it, it's contaminated. Space, we're running out of it. The seas are contaminated. You can't trust breathing anymore. Food's all full of poisons. All the corporations are corrupt. The church is falling down with pedophilia and God knows what.